Good evening. Welcome to today's video. It's been late today. I've spent some time scripting a certain essay I want to write, and for these videos, so I am using artificial light. There's some lights here and on my head or above my head, so I might look slightly different. I also shaved. We have our exams coming soon, so I might not do videos for some time in May or maybe even till September. We shall see what's possible and what's not possible. So we're going to do Saving Your Marriage or Loving the Unlovely. So there are two books which are going to be referential in this video essay, let's say. The Seven Principles for Making Marriage Work by John Gottman, PhD, and The Five Love Languages. So the divorce statistics for America for the lifetime is actually 67%. So for every 67 for every 100 people get married, or for every 100 marriages, there are going to be 67 of them which are going to end up in divorce over the lifetime. So we don't have the statistics here. The last time I checked, they're about 18%, but they're from unverified sources. Some say 40%, 30%. It's hard to know. Where I come from, in my entire location, there is not a single divorce. So I guess it's also dependent on where you are. But on countries, I think America is good with statistics. We can assume so about 67% divorce rate over the lifetime. I think I remember learning that Belgium used to have the highest divorce rate sometime in the past. And anyway, America is about 50%. Many countries are about 50%. So that means there's actually a high chance that you and your marriage are likely going to end up in divorce if the current trend is going to go on the Americanization of society. They usually say that when America catches a flu, the entire world, catches a cough, let's say. So, in the seven principles for making marriage work, Gottman actually delineates or identifies the factors which lead to a divorce quickly. And these are, he calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So one is criticism, number two is contempt, number three is defensiveness, number four is stonewalling. This might be stuff or material for videos to come next, but for now, I'm just going to mention them in a rush. Then we shall focus on the main topic of today. So criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So criticism is, I have an example here. There's a paragraph. So you'll always have some complaints about the person you live with. But there is a world of difference between complaints and criticism. So what's the difference between complaining and criticizing? Is there such a thing as constructive criticism? What do you think? So a complaint focuses on specific behavior or events. For example, I'm really angry that you didn't sweep the kitchen last night. We agreed that you'd take turns. Could you please do it now? This sounds like a woman who had agreed with the husband to, clean the kitchen, let's say. That is a complaint. Like very many complaints, it has three parts. One, here's how I feel. So here's how I feel. One. Two, about a very specific situation. You didn't sweep the floor last night. And three, here's what I need to be done. So my feelings, situation, what should be done. So complaint, feeling or frustration, situation or the problem, and then what needs to be done. That's a complaint. In contrast, a criticism is global and expresses negative feelings or opinions about the other's character or personality. I think I've heard from videos before that someone's like, you should just stop doing videos or something. Well, not entirely, but that's an example of criticism. While a complaint is, well, your background is bad, something, your smile is crooked, let's say. So that's a complaint. So in contrast, a criticism is global and expresses negative feelings or opinions about the other's character or personality. So for example, why are you so forgetful? I hate having to always sweep the kitchen floor when it's your turn. You just don't care. I guess you've heard that. If you've had a girlfriend before, I guess you know these things. I grew up in a place where people were, should I say, kind of the first place I grew up, my first village. So you'd see husbands and wife actually fighting publicly, and many women used to, they might not go immediately after the husband, but they'll say, wewe ni mjinga kama babako, to the kids, you are as dumb as your father, you're an idiot, let's say. And then the husband will say, hata wewe si mrembo, you're not that beautiful, or they'd fight physically. I think many men, when they are overwhelmed, when they are flooded, they resort to physical violence, while women resort to a lot of verbal, should I say, barrage, which leads to defensiveness and stonewalling and all that. But defensiveness is somebody tells you that I have an issue with how you talk to me. You're like, no, that's how I was born. I was born talking like this. In fact, my voice can never go higher than my nose. That's defensiveness. So how to listen to someone is somebody says, you came home late last night. I would wish for you to come home early. You don't say, I am a doctor, something like that. I'm an engineer, or I take care of the moon at night, or I take care of stars so that they don't fall down. That's being defensive. You listen, yeah, maybe not without any response, but you listen. So anyway, these are things which lead to divorce quickly. So criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. In fact, when all these things are put together, the divorce likelihood is very likely. So let's go on. Statements that contain complaints are soft startups. So there's something John Gottman calls a soft startup and a harsh startup. So when there are so many harsh startups, the couple is very likely to divorce over time. But when there are soft startups, you're likely to go on well. So what's the difference? So statements that contain complaints are soft startups. So complaints are soft startups, while those that criticize are harsh startups. Two very common forms of criticism are statements that contain you always and you never. So, you always come late, you always don't buy me this, you never do this. So those are criticisms, and they are a harsh startup. When you tell me that you always do this, I'm not likely to just sit back and listen to you like a therapist. While you're telling me things to do with me, I'm also, let's say, your spouse. So you're attacking me. There's no way I'm going just to sit and, just listen to you. So if you attack me as a person and not what I did, well, I'm immediately going to be defensive, because it's me on the attack, it's me on the fray, it's me on the arena. But if it's something I did, I didn't clean up the bed, I didn't make the bed. That's easy. I can go make it right now. Okay, so two very common forms of criticism are statements that contain you always and you never. I think women are good with this, very good with this. There's a verse in the Bible which says it's better to live in the roof than to live with a brawling woman. Brawling women usually say this, you always or you never. And then, husbands stay late at night at the bars, and I can stop there. So, but you can turn any complaint into a criticism just by inserting my favorite line. What is wrong with you? You don't make the bed, or you didn't make the bed last night, or you didn't turn on the Wi-Fi, or you didn't cook, or you didn't do the homework with the kids. What is wrong with you? So immediately adding that statement, what is wrong with you, turns it from a soft startup to a harsh startup, from a complaint to a criticism. So now to the main part of the video. So there's a chapter in the book The Five Love Languages called Loving the Unlovely. So there's a case of a certain woman called Anne and the husband called Glenn. So they reached the place where they were actually hating each other actively. They had become enemies. They had become constant fight mates, let's say. They were in a fight club, dubbed a home, let's say. So the lady asked Gary Chapman, Dr. Chapman, is it possible to love someone whom you hate? That's a question. Is it possible to love someone you actually hate? So, first of all, feelings of hatred are normal in a relationship. You, like what I said about the people in church, they they'd actually gotten to a place where they kind of hated each other. They knew it's really possible to hate your wife, to hate your husband, to maybe even hate your kids. I've been a teacher of children before in church and all that, and even in driving schools. It's actually possible to detest someone, and for lack of a better example, you can go from loving your friend to actually hating them. So is it possible to love that person who you've hated before? And that's what we are going to talk about. So in this book, in this chapter, the the author gives his own example. At the beginning of the relationship, they were not really doing well. The husband, I think, I don't remember the name of the wife. The wife is called Caroline and Gary. So they in the beginning of the relationship, they were actually at constant war. They always hurting each other. So when you hurt someone, by what you say or what you do, it's going to lead to anger, and anger which is not, said or assuaged, is going to lead to hatred. So hurts, anger, hatred. So it's so hard for someone to jump from this to this. So there's always this stage. So can you reverse this? And that's the challenge of this video or of the chapter. So for them, they actually tried to learn what was going on, and they learned that through constant contempt and abuses and verbal, should I say, barrage on the other person, they they got to a place where they didn't like each other that much. So they thought to maybe go back on that. And here is the paragraph which I got from the book. So what made the difference for us? That's now after they tried to learn their love languages and get back together. So what made the difference for us? We both know it was a choice to love. We had realized that if we were to continue our pattern of demanding and condemning, we would destroy our marriage. So first of all, people usually destroy their marriage. They usually demand and condemn a lot. We just learned now that there's a difference between criticizing and complaining. So since love cannot be commanded and love cannot be demanded, you actually drive the person away from you by criticism. So they, Gary and Caroline, learned that love is a choice, and that was the difference. So fortunately, over a period of about a year, we had learned how to discuss our differences without condemning each other, how to make decisions without destroying our unity, how to give constructive suggestions without being demanding, and eventually how to speak each other's primary love language. I'm lisping a lot today. I guess I am terrified. So they learned how to do this. They learned how to talk to each other well. And then most of all, they learned how to speak each other's primary love language, which is the basis of the entire book. So again, a primary love language is the way in which somebody understands love best. So for me, it's how you speak to me. For someone else, it's how you touch them. For somebody else, it's how much time you spend with them. So they learned how to go from contempt and criticism to complaining and constructive communication. So they learned that love is a choice. So if they'd chosen to be contemptuous towards the other person, they could actually choose to be loving and respectful and all that to the other person. So our choice to love was made in the midst of negative feelings toward each other. So you don't go from hating someone to loving them the same day. So you can actually choose to love someone while still loving the negative feelings. When we started speaking with each other's primary love language, the feelings of anger and hate did abate. So that's a success story. From going from hating each other to trying to love each other, they actually were successful. So now when Anne came bringing the situation of her husband, Gary had a suggestion, which is a hypothesis that if you tried loving someone actively as a choice who actually hates you, or whom you're in constant competition and quarrels, then maybe they might have their feelings back to you. Because you remember the previous video, we say that each of us has a love tank where it can be empty or full, or semi full. So over time, these people had been married for 10 years. They had depleted their emotional love tanks. They had tried loving each other based on their faith or stuff like that, but without actually adding to their love tank. They were riding on empty, if you can use that line. So here is the case. So here's the difference. Here's a comparison between Gary and Caroline, and between Anne and her husband. So our situation, Gary's and Caroline, the author of the book, and the people who are now hating each other. Our situation, however, was different from Anne's. Caroline and I had both been open to learning and growing. I knew that Anne's husband was not. She had told me the previous week that she had begged him to go for counseling. She had pleaded for him to read a book or listen to a speaker on marriage, but he had refused. So we usually know, again, whenever whenever a relationship is failing, women are usually likely to pick out that first. So women tend to know when things are going wrong than men. Men tend to be positive about a relationship, even when it's not good. So for the most part, you'll find that women are likely to suggest for therapy, for counseling, for a book and stuff. So from that background, that women tend to be more correct about the emotional situation of a relationship. I got that from the book Emotional Intelligence by uh, Daniel Goleman. Yeah, Daniel Goleman. When a lady tells you that they don't think that our relationship is going well, you should actually take her seriously, because they tend to have a more correct estimate of when things go bad. So when this wife was telling the husband that, you know, go buy a book, go for a seminar, go for counseling, go for all this, the husband actually refused, which is very typical of marriages. So, but this lady was actually interested in trying to do that despite and in spite of the refusal from the husband. So, what was the husband's viewpoint? According to her, his attitude was, I don't have any problems. How many times have you heard that? I don't have any problems. You are the one with problems. In his mind, he was right and she was wrong. It was as simple as that. Her feelings of love for him had been killed through years by his constant criticism and condemnation. After 10 years of marriage, her emotional energy was depleted and her self esteem almost destroyed. Was there any hope for Anne's marriage? Could she love an unlovely husband? Would he ever respond in love to her? So this is now the statement of our problem. Is it possible to love someone who is actually not into you anymore, who is actually convinced that you're the problem, that you need to change and they don't need to change? For the most part, when relationships are about to fail, it's always about the other person. It's always that you're the problem. You need to change, you need to grow up, you need to, you need to do this, you need to do this. You always do this, you never do this. That's how relationships fail. But from research, again, from John Gottman, it shows that in any relationship, during any argument, I don't remember the exact phraseology used, during any argument, during any verbal exchange, it's actually that rarely is either party or both parties guiltless. There's always something. So if you think the other person is wrong and you are right, why are they complaining in the first place? There could be something also you've done and they have done. So what is the love's greatest challenge? From this book, the author, after meeting Anne in a garden, actually went to read from the book of Luke, chapter 6, read from the entire book of Luke. And so since this is a Christian perspective, we are going to use love's greatest challenge, which is to love your enemies. which are the words uttered by Jesus Christ himself. So what are the options here? You can either lose your marriage, or you can try do something and maybe see what will happen. Maybe you might reap the benefits of getting your husband's or your wife's love back. Okay, so this how the Bible chapter reads. But to you who are listening, the other version say, to you who hear. So, but to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you, do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. So, this is the love's greatest challenge, loving your enemy. Imagine, can you love your enemy? And the answer is, for the most part, is no. But Jesus Christ himself, the God of love, says that we should love our enemies. Of course, it's maybe better to stay away from enemies and psychopaths and people who are likely to take advantage of you. But here you're being told, love your enemies. I used to be puzzled by the, should I say, old school advice to couples who are on the verge of splitting up. And the advice was, pray, don't split up. And that was fascinating. In a certain community in America, again, there was no divorce for almost 100 years. Why? Whenever people were about to divorce, they'd be taken to the inside of their church or inside of a sanctuary, and then they'd be given a room to stay alone for almost a week, where you only use one plate, you share a bed, and all that. And there's no communication with the outside world. You stay with the person you're with for almost a week. And for the most part, the people will actually go back to loving each other again. I don't know the probability of that. Maybe you can try it, maybe you cannot. Or you can find the exact details and maybe see if you can replicate that. So after the negative switch, which you spoke about earlier, you usually go from loving your spouse to actually hating them. And now the love's greatest challenge is love your enemy, love that spouse you no more hate. So the friends of this lady, whenever she tried to look for advice from her friends, they'd actually tell her to divorce, to get out of the relationship, because the man is not going to change. And this is the usual advice in this age where it's really hard to date people, to actually be in a successful long-term relationship. Whenever there's any slight miscommunication or any slight problem, what people want is out immediately. You know, there's this there's this challenge, or there's this um, movement where I think it was called the bare minimum movement. If a man buys your house, takes care of your kids, maybe buys household items, he's actually doing the bare minimum, and you should divorce him, which I think explains why modern women really have difficulties keeping a date or keeping a marriage together. Because if what is normal is bare minimum, then what is acceptable? So then there's a promise in Luke chapter 6, verse 36, verse 38, which says, give and it shall be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it shall be measured to you. So that was the promise. When if you try loving that spouse of yours who now does not love you, maybe you might get it back. Just as God says, give and it shall be given to you. There's something called the reciprocity rule, which is, generally speaking, if you are kind and loving towards people, they'll be kind and loving towards us. So that was what was being used in this situation. So could that principle of loving an unlovely person possibly work in a marriage as far gone as Anne's and Glenn's? I decided to do an experiment. I would check as my hypothesis that if Anne could learn her husband's primary love language and speak it for a period of time so that his emotional need for love was met, eventually he would reciprocate and begin to express love to her. I wondered, would it work? So I think you now get the entire situation. So this couple, they took 6 months to do this. The wife, her love language is quality time. Quality time is people who value when he spent time with them. And the love language of the husband was physical touch and sex also. And also his secondary love language was words of affirmation. So the first time after therapy, with Gary, with the doctor and Anne, the doctor suggested that, or Gary suggested that she would go home and she would tell her husband that from today forward, I want to be a better wife to you. Yeah, she actually went and said that. And the doctor had told her that since his secondary language is words of affirmation, she would not nag or she was not going to criticize him publicly. So she told her that if she had any complaints, she would write it down in a book, but not tell him. And whatever the husband says, she would take it as information and won't fight back or won't contend with it. So there was also a catch. There was also a place, should I say, where since we said the primary love language of the husband was physical touch and sex also. We said physical touch is not sex, but it can be. So the lady was asking, is it possible to actually be intimate with somebody you don't love? Isn't that hypocrisy? For which came the challenge that what she was doing was not hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is professing to have feelings which you actually don't have. But doing something out of choice is an act of love. Actions are not hypocritical, or doing something out of choice is not hypocritical, but feigning to do it out of positive emotions when there is none is hypocrisy. It's hiding what is your true feelings in your heart and then replacing it for a cheap gimmick to attain whatever you want to. So for the first month, the lady actually did what the the husband said. And after 2 months only, the husband was actually beginning to give better suggestions of what should be done. And it was such a surprise for the wife. And anytime after each month, this experiment was supposed to last for 6 months. And each month, the the husband would actually suggest more what should be done, and the wife would do it. And over time, the positive emotions for the husband, the positive regards for the husband by the wife actually returned. And from her complaints, which of course mirrored her love language, which was quality time, were the next time they went for therapy, they she was told that she can actually tailor her complaints and then present them to Glenn as suggestions for what they should do. Let's say maybe we can go for a walk somewhere in in a public place, or you can spend an evening together, the two of us. And over time, they actually got back together. Though the husband never went for therapy, though the husband never read a single book by Gary Chapman or any other person for that matter, he actually referred to Gary as a miracle worker because he actually saved a marriage using the wife. So, is it possible to love an unlovely person? And the answer is yes. Is it guaranteed that if you do what you do, you're likely to get your marriage back? And the answer is no. What was keeping Anne from divorcing? It was a moral. It was, should you say, cognitive dissonance. For the most part, as Christians, we know that it's wrong to divorce except for infidelity, and also for infidelity, it's actually possible to forgive your spouse. Again, depending on all those factors. There's a book by Getting Back Together After Divorce by After Infidelity by John Gottman. I think if you want to get the books, you can buy them. So it's actually possible to love someone who you had hated before by doing the love experiment, by loving the unlovable. So this was loving the unlovable or loving the unlovely or saving a marriage. Pardon me, today I was very nervous because, well, I'm not into such topics. I'm not married myself. But depending on the reception, maybe you can do this some more. Next, we shall do attachment styles or whatever else comes to mind. Have a good day.